Good evening, everyone. Wait, get off the stage. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third Hacktoberfest help desk of the day. My name is Joe. God, it's late. My name is Joe, and I am going to be your host for this evening. We've got a special guest show for the day, a nice change for those of you who tuned in earlier and had to put up with me talking at you for the last two episodes. So welcome to the Race Desk. Oh my God, it's going to be a struggle tonight, folks. Welcome to the help desk. What are we here to do? What is this help desk? We are here to help you with all of your Hacktoberfest problems, whether they be big or whether they be small. If you want help finding an ideal project or making your first Hacktoberfest contribution, you can come to us and we'll help you find that project. If you have a specific issue with a particular project or error message you're getting on a project, or you've got a particular pull request you're working on, you can also submit that to the help desk. We're here to help with all things of all manner and shapes and sizes. Indeed, Matt, talking is hard. I don't know what's happened to me. We're just at that time of the day. So if you have any of those problems and you want help with them, not only can you drop them here in the chat at any time, but you can submit them to our help desk at raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. On that website, you will find our help desk submission form. You will also find a little place where you can subscribe to notifications. We're going to be sending out an email to everyone who subscribes on that site about the rest of the week's schedule tomorrow morning or this evening, one of the two. You can find our schedule and the wonderful guests we have in store for the rest of the week at twitch.tv/RaiseDev's schedule. That's set up with our schedule for the rest of the week right now. We have 3 shows a day, 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 4 p.m. Central European Time, and 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So lots of great content. We've got some wonderful guests on the rest of the show. I can see at least one of those guests, 2 of those guests are currently in the chat. Welcome, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. And so that would be a great place to go to check out the schedule for the rest of the week. So who are Raise.dev? Why are we doing this show? Raise.dev is a service for you to help level up your developer career, whether you are looking for your first developer job, your next developer job, a promotion, finishing a project, anything like that. Our goal is to help you close the experience gap. What do we mean by the experience gap? We mean that sensation when you're trying to get that next thing, trying to apply for that job, and they are asking you for experience, which you could only possibly get by doing that job, and you end up in this chicken and egg situation. We want to help you get the experience you need to get the next job that you want. And we do that via our wonderful network of expert coaches that will hook you up with those expert coaches. And then you'll be able to go to them and help. They'll set you up with a special development plan, and they'll help set your sights on a goal and work with you to achieve that goal. We are free while we're in early access, and you can find out more at raise.dev. So that's all the preliminaries out of the way. Just a final warning. Our moderation bot for the channel is grumpy. Do not post any URLs without letting me know first. If you want to post a link to something, that's much appreciated. Please share your wonderful resources. Just give me a heads up so I can add you to the allow list so that the mod bot doesn't ban you. Poor Matt here got banned so many times. We had to add him to the VIP list so that he'd stop getting banned. So if you do want to throw anything in chat, just let us know. And we'll do that. And you can talk in chat whenever you want. We are going to be interacting with chat today. So if you have any questions, whether they be relevant to the show or not, throw them in the chat and we'll get along and answer those. So that's all of my poorly pronounced rambling done for the intro. That just leaves me to introduce our special guest. We're very lucky today to be greeted by Sukrit. Welcome, Sukrit. There we go.
Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Yeah, great, thanks. How are you? Welcome to the show in very appropriate attire.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I figured it was only appropriate to wear this shirt. Didn't really make sense to wear anything else. Yeah, I spent a long time deliberating, though.
Yeah, I gave up the ambition very early into this 3 streams a day thing of wearing a Hacktoberfest shirt because I don't do laundry that regularly. So I very quickly run out.
That makes sense. That makes total sense. Yeah.
So yeah, welcome to the show. Do you want to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Sukrit. I'm currently a software engineer at Broker Buddha. We're an insurance tech startup trying to do some stuff in a very antiquated industry. I'm a Raise.dev alum of earlier this year. And self-taught developer, went to a boot camp for a little bit and have a background in sales.
Perfect. Cool. So to let everyone know how we're going to do this, as Sukrit mentioned, he's a Raise.dev alum and had a background in sales. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about your developer journey. And then I believe we were chatting a little bit before about a side project that you brought for us today that we're going to do a little bit of a before and after on, which I'm very excited about. That'll be a new one.
So yeah, I guess about that side project. It's always very, like, I think we talked about this earlier. It's always very difficult as a developer to go back and revisit your old code, especially if you know you've grown a lot since then.
Right.
So I was going to talk about a project that I did pre-raise, and then now just a short time after raise.
I'm so excited
back
about
at it and seeing some of the patterns that I could have used, just kind of tear it apart. It's going to be pretty bad. I took a quick glance at it earlier, so it's mostly going to be.
I'm hoping it's going to be affirming.
Hopefully,
like everyone in the audience will see themselves in this moment, and we'll all go on a journey together. So yeah, let's kick off. So first of all, I guess let's start with. So actually, you joined Raise.dev and you were a hardware salesman. Like, where did your developer journey start for you?
Ooh, okay. So I guess it's been all like an ongoing thing for most of my life. I dabbled in a little bit of everything at an early age, like small stuff like HTML, CSS when I was like super, super young. And then eventually getting into a little bit of like JavaScript and eventually getting into a little bit of like Python. I think the main reason I learned Python was because I was really interested in Pygame, and I made like small like top-down shooters. It was, but they were terrible, to be completely honest. But it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Making games was awesome.
Yeah, more fun and more productive than playing them.
And
sure. So
this is like an interesting tangent, just like games as a medium. Like, I hear frequently people getting into software development because like they wanted to mod a certain game or this kind of stuff. But actually, like, making games in Pygame, I first encountered Pygame, I think, in university during software engineering. And one of the fun things about game programming that I don't think you do a lot of in web dev programming is like, there's a lot of, you get to bring in a lot of physics and other kind of like random knowledge for, especially during school, that like you're being taught and you have no application for it. And now you're like, oh wait, that's actually a thing I could use in this game.
There's like certain like math and like calculating like trajectories and things like that, and physics. You would never, like, I had never used it in my current job, but it was somewhat applicable in game development. Obviously, you're going to use physics and add like projectile trajectories and things like that. Definitely interesting. Also, there are tons of great libraries for it now, so like you don't have to do math on your own, which is nice. But it's a great medium to kind of like start learning and get people interested. And I know like that's one of the main reasons why I got interested in programming, was just kind of like I wanted to make games. It was really, really fun. But I didn't really focus on it too much. I didn't think I was very good at it. Although I enjoyed it, it was very difficult to manage with all the other things that were going on in my life. And then what else did I do? I don't have a traditional education. So I went to high school, I dropped out of college. And so I never really had, I guess, the knowledge that I felt comfortable with pursuing a career in like computer hardware or computers, software development. And then I worked sales for a decent amount, and through some like random luck, I think I used to work at a retail store, and I talked to one of customer came in and ends up being one of my best friends now. He bought a Steam gift card, and I talked to him about computers. He's really impressed with my knowledge, so he offered me. He had just gotten promoted at his company, and he was going to hire some people. It was the most random.
That's so bizarre. That's amazing.
Yeah, and now he's one of my best friends. I lived with him earlier in the year. It was great. We were roommates. And
talk about selling yourself. That's fantastic. Like, sell him out a gift card and he leaves with an employee. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So I got into computer hardware sales, which was great, and got me just excited again about computers, technology. Did a little bit more in terms of like self-learning for programming, but primarily for my job, I was learning about hardware and learning a lot about keeping up with modern trends. We were talking about 3090s earlier, always being on top of like always being on top of like video card knowledge and things like that is very important. And I was doing a lot of self-learning at that time, learned a lot of JavaScript, a lot of free code camp, which was super useful. If anybody's looking to learn or even brush up on some skills, free code camp is fantastic. Throw that link in the chat.
So like on the note of like the self-learning you were doing at the time of this job, like you were describing this hardware sales job to me and it sounded wild. Like it didn't sound like when you said hardware sales, I imagined like almost like a retail environment, like you first described. This sounded like very intense by comparison.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I was selling like all sorts of weird things. I was doing it was in a way sort of like consulting. A customer would come in, they would have like very, very specific needs, right? Or I would talk to a customer on the phone, they would have very, very specific needs. And it ranged from everything from like building servers or like a cluster of servers, and like getting them the appropriate hardware they needed for that, or like at one point I did like a mineral oil submerged gaming PC. So it was like a very, very like vast range of projects, and just having knowledge across all of that was awesome. And I loved it. It was a lot of fun for me. But
how many Bitcoin mining rigs did you have to set people up with?
Quite a few, actually. And during that craze, that was a substantial source of income for me.
That's incredible.
Selling mining rigs to people. That's a whole. That could be a whole hour and a half conversation.
I recently picked up a secondhand 1080 Ti. Well, recently, a while ago, picked up a secondhand 1080 Ti, and it like I had no idea about like the whole world, I guess, of Bitcoin machines until actually Hugh Rawlinson, who just popped up in the chat, was like, was it Hugh? Someone was like, you need to test that, make sure it's not an X mining card. And I was like, oh God, is that a thing that is like a concern?
It was pretty interesting. I mean, through that, just like knowing people that were doing that and getting rid of cards, I ended up getting a 1080 Ti for like dirt cheap from somebody. Did a lot of tests to it myself to make sure it was fine, but I got a super cheap 1080 out of it, so it's great.
Nice.
So that was what I did for quite a bit of time.
And along the way, you were using like things like Free Code Camp, which I threw in the chat, as Sukrit said, super useful resource.
Yeah, and I didn't really have, I guess, the confidence in myself to go and pursue that as a career, although it was like always something I'd wanted to do. And I just didn't have the confidence to pursue it full time. And eventually, a couple of years ago, my father ended up passing away, and it was very sudden. It kind of just jarred me a little bit, but it was a nice wake-up call to realize, like,
interesting.
Things are very, you never know what's going to happen in life, right?
Right.
If I want to do something, I want to pursue something, I'm going to do it now. There's no point in waiting. I'm going to commit to it. I don't want to wonder what if in the future. So I quit my job the day after, and everybody's pretty supportive of it. I did a lot of self-learning. I eventually enrolled in a boot camp to kind of help. Went to Flatiron School. Cool. Great boot camp, but
I've heard good things about Flatiron. Yeah,
it was great. I was in a program it was, I believe, an experimental program they don't do anymore. It's called Access Labs in Brooklyn, and it was all people from like very diverse backgrounds, a lot of like low income background, and it was great to have such a diverse group of people learning together and doing something to improve their lives. Everybody was there to pursue some sort of advancement in their own lives.
Right.
Some people had a decent amount of programming knowledge beforehand. A lot of people had none. And it was great. It was great to see. It was a great, unique environment to learn, and not just about programming, but about teamwork. Did a lot of pair programming there, which is great. Nice. I think that's probably the best skill I picked up in Flatiron School, being a decent pair programmer.
Which I expect we'll come back to when we talk about Rails.dev in a minute as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's fantastic. I'm actually super glad I got decent, or I can learn to tolerate pair programming, because originally I hated pair programming. And actually, one of my best friends from Flatiron School, who I ended up working with at Raise, Michelle, I think the first week of Flatiron School, we pair programmed, and I found out later she hated me. But now we're like
from the pair programming session.
Yeah, from the pair programming session, she thought I was a terrible person.
Oh, dang. So what is it you like? How did you used to do pair programming? What did you do for Michelle?
I think I didn't realize that it was also like it wasn't even pair programming. It was 3 people pairing. One person was driving and 2 people were navigating, and I think. We ended up having a lot of side conversations, and may have accidentally excluded Michelle, or maybe discounted her a couple times. I wasn't a very good active listener.
Right.
So I definitely got a lot better at that. But I think it was the listening that I was pretty bad at.
Fascinating. Sorry, what someone just said, please tell Joe on pairing in chat. My problem with pairing, which is being referred to here, is I have like enormous performance anxiety over pair programming. Like you put me in the driver's seat with pair programming and I'm like, I can't remember what QWERTY is. How do I type on a keyboard? Kind of performance
I don't think that
anxiety.
ever goes away though. I think everybody has
really?
that. I for sure have it. In my current company, I pair programming with my boss, and I pair programming with my boss, and he will also sometimes forget the most basic things. And I think that's just performance anxiety. And I think part of a good pair programming session is having a partner who understands that. You know,
fascinating. Okay, I'm getting convinced.
It's great. I mean, you just have to practice a bit too, and eventually the performance anxiety goes away, and eventually it just becomes natural. It's pretty great to also be reminded of things that you may not, or just to get a second opinion on something. No one's going to be able to remember like every design pattern ever, you know. So sometimes you just need that little extra nudge. And it's also like natural, like rubber ducking, like talking out a problem with somebody.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, you get to rubber duck as you go along. So yeah, cool. Exactly. So you were out at Flatiron School doing a lot of pair programming. How long were you there for?
I was there for 15 weeks.
Cool.
At Flatiron School, so it's a relatively short boot camp. I mean, boot camps in general, kind of short. They kind of fling you into the world with a lot of like knowledge into a ball, but it was pretty great. All I did was program. Basically, I would I would show up 8 a.m. and I would probably be there. I think some nights I was there till like midnight. There were a couple nights I was there till like 2, 3 a.m. And it was just great. I mean, I met a lot of great people. I wasn't doing anything I didn't want to do. I was doing a lot of self-learning as well while I was there. So I would take what I was learning in the curriculum and then kind of apply it in other places and make a lot of side projects. I would read. I was always a weird dude that was reading documentation on my laptop during my downtime. I think like before we had like a whole like segment on React. And I think before we got to it, I had read all of the React documentation.
Okay, I see. Proper try hard.
I enjoy it. I
that's great.
Sometimes I'm talking to my girlfriend and she'll be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm just reading documentation on my phone because I'm bored. It's great. You know, that's one of the nice things with bringing it back to like Hacktoberfest and open source. I know this Hacktoberfest documentation contribution is not as encouraged, but documentation is super important. You know, people read it. I read it. So if anything, maintain your documentation for me because I will for sure read it. Yeah.
And on that note, tomorrow morning, 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 10 a.m. Central European Time, we'll be doing documentation with Flawed Reese from Microsoft. Come hang out. So yeah,
I'll definitely tune into that one.
I think that's 6:30 a.m. your time. So I hope.
Okay, I'll watch the recording of it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess where were we? I was at Flatiron School. And then I graduated Flatiron School, and I remember towards the end of my time at Flatiron School, another Raise alum. So the pilot program had kind of like 2 waves. So it was the first wave, which was, I believe it was, am I allowed to like give names out here? I don't know if anybody does.
I mean, we had Ching Ching, who was on the original wave on the show a couple of days ago.
Ching was on the original wave. Frida, Jacob.
Frida's also coming on the show in a couple of weeks.
Chelsea was on too. So that was like the initial wave of Raise developers. And Frida was also a Flatiron School alum. And she reached out to the Slack channel, kind of just talking about Raise a little bit. If anybody had any questions to reach out, because John was looking to do another wave. So I reached out to Frida, applied to Raise, didn't hear anything back. So that was a pretty great sign. I was kind of disappointed. But then eventually, the next month, I had an interview with Raise. And I interviewed with Chris, who eventually ended up being my coach. Great human being, phenomenal coach, phenomenal developer, great teacher. I talked to him. I interviewed with him. We talked for a decent amount of time. And I think we were in the same, it was a large room, but John was also doing interviews in the background. So I briefly met John. I think I just shook his hand as he was leaving. And then, I thought the interview went pretty good.
Right.
Which I guess it did. So it
You
worked out.
got it raised. It must have done pretty well. Yeah.
So it must have gone pretty well. And then the next day, I was volunteering at a conference. It was a CTO conference. It was great. It was like so wild to be there.
Yeah.
I was just volunteering, and like everybody has.
And just like a room full of CTOs, or what?
It was literally a room full of CTOs.
Okay.
It was like 200-300 CTOs, like Nick Rockwell, former CTO of New York Times, CTO of MongoDB was there. It was wild.
Yeah.
And I'm there like holding up cue cards for people on stage. Great. I got to.
You're the one telling the CTOs to stop talking and to leave the stage.
Yeah, exactly. So I was a little afraid of that. At one point, I was like, wow, I have authority here over people who should have authority over me. This is a bit much. But it was really funny. I was there and I'm sitting down to get ready to hold up these cue cards, tell people to get off stage. And who sits next to me? No other than John from Raise. So he recognized me. We chatted for a while. Yeah. And that was actually my first. I was also interviewing at other companies. And I was talking to John. I had already had like interviews with other companies, and I already had like a really good offer that I thought I was going to take. Ooh, and I was just talking to John, and it was great to hear his perspective on like why he started Raise, and kind of just really sell me on leveling up developers. That's kind of Raise's motto, and the changing of the career trajectory of a young developer. Right, like I'm a developer not because like I want to make a ton of money, not because of a bunch of these other reasons. Like I really enjoy this stuff. I want to learn more. I'm constantly learning. I want to keep learning. And his, I guess, vision for leveling up developers and kind of putting me with a dedicated mentor that I can talk to, have these spontaneous pair programming sessions. Chris would always break out into like spontaneous lectures too. It was great.
This is a recurring theme I hear from all the Raise grads is talking about the like, someone had a question and now it's a lecture and now we almost will go around. Yeah, it sounds great.
But they're great lectures, and it's very personalized. It's very attentive to you as an individual. And since you're working directly with a coach or a mentor, you're getting a lot of like directed knowledge. It's specifically for you. They understand the context of your current skill level, and what you may or may not be familiar with. So it's very interesting. And talking to John just kind of like really convinced me to like really want to pursue Raise. And it ended up getting the offer. Great time. And while I was talking to John, he, I guess, did like some pseudo technical interviews to try to get my
in the audience of the CTO conference.
So like a little bit there, and we went out to lunch.
Good. Okay.
And that was like a kind of like a dedicated, like, I don't think he wanted it to be a formal technical interview, but he made me come with a project I wanted to talk about, and we just had a technical discussion. Yeah. And I think that technical discussion was like super mind blowing, because I would talk about a project and one I was really excited about, and it was actually the one that I'm going to show you. Because he told me like all of these, we talked about all these other like patterns I could have applied, or like I talked to him about what I was doing, and he talked to me about, I guess, just alternative methods of doing the same thing, but in a more efficient manner, in a more scalable manner, at a really like production level, which is a lot of stuff you never really learn about in a boot camp or when you're self-learning. You never really think about things at scale. This project was something I built for myself, and it worked for that purpose. But you never really think about things at scale. And that conversation was just mind blowing to kind of think about all this knowledge that he has and Chris has, and just from experience, things that you get from years and years of being in the industry that it kind of just gets fed to you as I guess a Raise student or a Raise mentee. So that was great. And then talking to Chris was also phenomenal. And then I started working at Raise, and the whole premise of Raise at the time is we were working on site for a client as effectively contractors. And I was working with Michelle from my time at Flatiron, and Chris was sitting right next to me every day.
He went on site with you to the contract.
he was on site with us, and it was great to just have like a mentor there, and just be able to turn to him whenever we needed. The code reviews were super in depth. It was great. I remember one time Chris made me iterate on a PR probably for a week. It was a small PR, and he had to like emphasize that he wasn't doing it because the code was bad. It was because it was a low priority feature, and he just wanted to like. There were plenty of learning examples from it, or learning
because it's low priority. You have the time to be able to like spend that time on this thing, right?
Exactly. So that was frustrating, but I learned a lot from it. Cool. You learn all these like weird techniques and patterns. Got some recommendations on some great books. Just phenomenal like directed learning. A lot of stuff that I feel accelerated my career path. I feel like that's a bad term to use. I don't want to say like I'm not going to be a CTO next year. I'm not. I'm not a senior dev now.
Right.
But I definitely learned a lot more in a couple months than I think I would have learned on my own in like a year.
Yeah.
Because you just don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And just having somebody there to point it out to you in a kind, collected manner, and to kind of guide you. To understand what your goals are and kind of just nudge you in that direction was super helpful to have.
For sure. Yeah. It's funny you like what you say about you don't know what you don't know, and like the having the direction. I had like a similar like a much more level experience where like when I first went to university for computer science, I'd been trying to learn to code for a while and had like never stuck with me. And I'd done that a lot in like the summer before starting this degree. And so I was really like, oh God, maybe this isn't for me. And then like just having someone else who knew what they were talking about throw that stuff at me, like made it stick in a way that like all those hours of self-learning never did. So I totally get what you mean by that. Really interesting. Because how long were you at Raise before you moved on and got your next job?
Raise for 3 months. So not a very long time. For I guess the pilot program, but I was raised for 3 months, and then I got an offer to be full time at the actually the company that we were working on site for was Broker Buddha, my current employer. So it was great to see all of that like pay off. Really, I don't think I would have been at a level that would have impressed this employer in particular without Chris or Raise.dev. They were impressed with my performance. Impressed with, I guess, my technical maturity for the amount of time I had been a professional developer or even an apprentice developer. So they gave me a full-time offer, and I've been working there since.
Nice. Awesome.
Loved it. It's great company. Really love my team members. I'm very happy about that.
That's always lovely. And one of the things we heard a little bit from Ching Ching when she was on the show last week was that like it's not the case that like Raise.dev is like, cool, off you go to employment, see you never. Did you have the same kind of experience where like they John and Chris also like gave you advice during the negotiation stage and this kind of thing?
Yeah, it was very humble, like very nice to see that like John and Chris weren't just going to like abandon me, right? Like they gave me advice all the way through. I still talk to them if I ever need any advice. Like sometimes I reach out to Chris. I think for quite a while I would do like weekly calls with Chris, but it was primarily Chris would host like a meditation, weekly meditation. We would do that over Zoom.
I've been missing out on Chris meditations. I think John's watching this. John, I demand a new segment in our weekly meetings.
Yeah, it's great. I would highly recommend it if Chris wants to host it. He's phenomenal at it, but we would spend the first 20 to 30 minutes catching up and just talking about things. I would talk about things that I've done at work and just like new technical things I'd learned, and he would also be really excited about it, and we would just nerd out about stuff like that.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, there's a whole alumni community. And I say whole, it's like less than 10 people, but there's an alumni community right now, and we all talk, and we that
Slack channel is booming sometimes.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So we mentioned during this chat about your side project. Do you want to introduce us to this side project?
Sure. Side project. When I was in Flatiron School, I made this project. It was a very selfish project, but I'm very lazy, and I know a lot of developers that are and don't have very.
It's a good motivation to be a developer, automate.
Yeah. You want to automate tasks, and you want to make things like easy for yourself. So I created a little application that was very selfish. It basically pings an API for news articles. Premise of the application, a customized news feed for myself, effectively. Subscribe to certain topics that interest me. And every day, this application will pull articles, the top headlines from these topics for the previous day. It'll use a natural language processing service for summarizing the articles. And don't worry, I know there's strict laws about web scraping news in certain states and countries. So I did exclude certain sources from that. So I would.
Is it really? I would have thought, like, is news not
so
public
for certain countries, you have to be careful about like scraping data off of like a news website,
right?
Or certain certain news sites will like actively prevent bots,
right? I'm guessing these are the ones who like have paywalls and like are selling it as like a newspaper kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, not all of them. I know like some of them are pretty lenient with it, as long as you provide attribution and you link back to the original source. You're not making any money from it. So there were still plenty of news sources to be able to use from. But it would basically summarize those articles using natural language processing. Give me a 5 to 10 sentence summary. And it wouldn't generate new sentences. It would just pull sentences that had a weighted importance level to the article and kind of just send it to my inbox every day. So I would get this nice 5 to 10 sentence summary of the top headlines for the previous day. And I could click a link to the full article if I wanted to.
Cool.
So that was basically the whole application. But there was a lot of like pretty bad stuff that I did in this. I only recently glanced at this project again. I think I completed it and hadn't looked at it for months and months. And before this stream, I looked at maybe like 2 files, and I think I almost vomited. But
excellent! I'm so excited.
We'll get in.
We were.
I'm sorry.
We were talking. Sorry, me and John were talking before this show about fun kind of like code-centric activities we can do with guests. And I've decided, since talking to you about this project, that like guilt trips is going to be the name of the segment. We're going to call it going on a guilt trip back for our passcode. Yeah, this sounds wonderful. I'm very excited to get into it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if you want, I can just share my screen and get started.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get it added up. Sweet. And this is a Ruby project, right?
Yeah. So this is a Ruby project. There's a whole React front end as well. I looked at the React front end. It isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but there are definitely some improvements. Yeah. But I kind of wanted to show you the Rails.
I imagine this was like, when was this first one written?
This was written last year in November.
Okay. So was the front end pre-hooks or post?
It was post-hooks, but hooks were very new. I did incorporate hooks in the front end, though, which is pretty nice. The hooks were like the shiny new thing. They weren't even teaching it at my boot camp. But as I mentioned, I read all of the React documentation. So I gave it a go and used some hooks and wrote some custom hooks for it. So the front end isn't as bad as this back end.
Here we go. All right. So I need to full screen this so I can actually see what you're showing. Awesome.
Okay, sweet. I can also zoom in. I feel like...
Oh, no, it's all good. It's because otherwise I have like a quartered screen. So this is perfect.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So let's just take a look at like some of the
standards for people who don't do Rails. I guess like this is a good place to start, right? We're looking at model view controller situation going on here, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Rails is a very typical like MVC paradigm, very cleanly separated. Actually, you can see in model views controllers right there. You've got some nice little things like jobs that I didn't know existed back then. Obviously, I saw the folder, never made use of them, and that's one of the main.
I'm so glad you said that. Like that's my whole Rails experience. Like. Obviously, I used to work with John at GitHub, and GitHub's a Rails shop. And so whilst at GitHub, I tried to learn Rails multiple times. And I always had that feeling of like, okay, it's generated me a million folders. I don't know what any of these do. Yeah, I'm going to ignore them. Just like,
I think Rails, it's very intuitive. It's very beginner friendly, but there's so much extra stuff added on that sometimes you don't even know is bundled in with all of this other stuff, like action mailbox. You have like action cable, all these like different action.
I've heard all of these terms before.
Yeah,
I mean, mailbox I can work out.
Yeah, a lot of it, like you probably wouldn't. I mean, some applications will use all of them, but some of them, you'll never use. In this one, I did end up using the mailer, literally just to send myself an email,
Right.
which was kind of nice. Jobs are great. Active job is a nice little, I guess, interface adapter for, like, let's say you have like Sidekick and you hook it up to like Redis, which is nice, which I also knew nothing about in this. I got all these controllers. Concerns I didn't know were a thing, so these concerns folders are empty.
What is a concern?
So a concern is, I guess, I feel like I'm going to butcher the explanation because I'm not.
I mean, I won't know any better. So
but
if someone in the chat can catch us, it'll be fine. Yeah.
So concerns, they're like it's like shared, like functionality for certain, like, let's say, models. So if something like a user is authorizable, right? It's like the typical convention for Rails is like naming a concern like authorizable or like confirmable, right? So you'll put like a module or something inside of concerns to, I guess, adapt into like a model, and that model might be like, you'll have all this code to make that model like authorizable. So I believe concerns are, I guess, like the naming convention for that. Then obviously you have like these controllers. Some of these controllers didn't do anything, which is kind of nice. Oh man, I have all these.
You get Robocop errors.
I don't have a Robocop.yaml in this, but yeah, at least like my controllers were relatively slim. You know, like this one is very slim. It's kind of nice. So slim controllers, fat models is kind of what you want to go for. So I guess let's just take a look at something here. This one I looked at briefly earlier, just my users controllers. A lot of like authorization stuff going on in here. Yeah, this is a little messy because we have one. I'm actually really curious. This secret might be in plain text. I don't know if I knew. So let's actually see.
Is the server still running? Is the secret at risk of causing any damage here?
The server's not up anymore, so don't worry. The secret, if it is in plain text, let's see what happens. So obviously inheriting from application controller in here. Okay, no, so I do know what a Rails.
It was nice.
Which is nice. It's a JWT secret key, which is nice, and it is in the Rails credentials, which is great.
Cool. So I'm guessing that Rails application credentials, that's like a key store thing going on there.
So it's sort of like an environment file.
Cool.
And it's like built in. I know a lot of people use like
built into the Rails object. Yeah. Okay.
So it's encrypted there. There's a master key
that's
somewhere. I don't remember where. Credentials.yaml right in here.
Cool.
So this is like an encrypted master key, and it's a nice way to pass along like shared environment variables.
Yeah.
But you can give your credential key, like let's say in like a password share, like a 1Password or something like that. And then you can push all of this up to like a version control, like Git, and not have to worry about, like having an environment file or anything like that.
That's awesome.
Or adding an environment file to your Git ignore, which is kind of nice.
I don't know why the idea that like there would be like an encrypted credential store in like the Rails object is such like a novel thing to me, but that's super cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, right? Like, pretty great for having all these like really nice, novel, easy to use things. Although like .env, which is a nice gem, is probably even easier than using Rails credentials. But if you don't want any extra dependencies,
and I'm guessing .env is just like set up to read env. Like .env files.
It's literally just a way to store your environment variables. So yeah, we can take a look at this. So luckily, the secret is encrypted, but I know this code here is the same as this code here. Actually, figure it out fine. So we're not being very dry here. Yeah, this is exactly the same code. Actually, let's see how many times. 4 times. Doing the exact same thing. So that's pretty nice. So we can just cut all that out. And I guess all I'm really doing there is I was also really bad at naming methods.
So rather than name them, you just don't make them a method. It's top-level strats.
You don't have to name anything if you don't make them.
It is the #1 problem in computer science. This is known.
Yeah. So I'm still terrible at naming things. Joe, this is just finding a user, and I don't know. Yeah, we can do like find. Just do something really idiomatic, like find user Find user by. No, this is authorize a user by token.
So Matt in our chat says naming methods is honestly such an art.
Yeah, naming methods is very difficult. It could be like a whole a service in and of itself. We start a company that just coaches people to name methods
correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we have authorized user by token. The only thing it needs is token. I definitely understand what you mean about that performance anxiety, though. Now that I'm on stream, I did not mean
you're doing great. You're doing wonderful.
All of that. Thank you for lying to me, Joe.
I mean, I'm also like learning Ruby as we go, so it's all good.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, something like this, super, super minor. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even have put it in the private area of this controller, but I'm not looking to add a ton of files to this old project. But small things like that really like just eat away at they eat away at my soul, realizing that.
We did put that new, we did. I can see it there.
Yeah, I had code duplicated 4 times in one controller. Small things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, the controller isn't like terrible. I'll probably like move some of this extra logic. At least personally, I don't like to have a lot of logic in my controllers. I like to put them in like maybe models, maybe like service objects, something like that.
Sure. Is there a particular reason that you try to avoid that?
I guess the paradigm I like to follow is fat model slim controllers. Controllers, if you like follow, I guess the is it like a single responsibility principle, right? The controller's duty is to, I guess, like take a request and route the request, in my opinion, or at least the way I've built these controllers. So they really shouldn't be doing much more than that. Like you just take the request, kind of understand the params that are going on in there, maybe handle some authorization, like some sort of like verifying that the tokens are correct. But even that could be like pushed into like a service object, right?
Yeah.
Or some sort of like model that authorizes. And then even for, I think that would be
cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then like rendering logic, there are view helpers that I could use. So you can put that rendering logic like this, or if I wanted to create like a user, well, this is rendering JSON, but if I was like doing some sort of like calculation or some handling of these objects beforehand, before I just render them, you can move that to like a render, like a view helper.
I see.
Right. So that way your controllers are very like idiomatic. The whole point of Rails is to be like very idiomatic. The whole point of Ruby is to be very idiomatic. So you can kind of just read it and make sense of what it's doing. And that kind of like gets me into another file that I looked at earlier that really sucked was this one here. So like some of this stuff, this like huge if else, it's not huge, but an if else that just has an else that returns false, right? It leads to like very indented code. And
this looks like JavaScript.
It looks like JavaScript. And we don't want Ruby to be like JavaScript, right?
Right.
We want Ruby wants to make developers happy, right? Like that's what the whole thing with MADS is. So small things like learning things like guard clause.
Right.
So like guard clauses were just a thing that I never learned, never knew existed, but they're super simple, and Ruby makes them very, very easy to write. So we could do something like return, you don't have to return false, just return unless. I didn't even know the unless statement was a thing, so that's nice to know now.
So what?
So we can just refactor a lot of this.
I was very distracted by Matt's Hugh's good question. Can you walk me through unless? What is unless?
Oh, so unless is just the opposite of if. If self.date is equal to date.today got to string, right?
And then unless is just like it doesn't.
Yeah, unless it's the opposite of that. So I have if this do a bunch of stuff, else just return false. So I could actually just unindent all of this code because heavily indented code is pretty bad code in my opinion, especially when you're working with Ruby. Maybe not in JavaScript. JavaScript you have to indent a whole bunch of things, or in HTML where you have like divs on divs and divs.
Right.
That's markup. or marked down. So we can get rid of that if statement there. And
I'm also very distracted by what's going on with the type on your selfs. Like, what is happening? What is that font on your self?
Yeah.
What is that?
So phenomenal thing that I spent a ton of time setting up is this font, and it's based on the type of wording, or it also changes the linting that you have set up in your linting settings. But you can make certain parts of your code italicized.
Okay.
And then the italic version of this font is cursive.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it also like leads to like you can have like a bunch of ligatures. I guess it doesn't work in Ruby, but if I have like an arrow function in JavaScript.
Right. It would then actually complete that to an arrow.
Yeah, it would complete that into an arrow, and it would look pretty.
Yeah.
It would just look pretty.
Awesome.
Which is kind of nice.
So before I stop distracting you, one question on the model stuff that came from our chat. Should models be mutable then, rather than having the controller owning the transformations of data?
Interesting
Don't feel
question.
pressured.
Yeah, no. I definitely feel pressured. You can't tell me not to feel pressured. Should models be mutable, right? I guess that depends. And an instance of a model can be mutable, right? Like we can, if we're storing it to the database, but the whole model itself, I don't think would change very much. But you could instantiate an object, right, from a model, or you can use a model to, or you can use some sort of like service object. You can instantiate a model and mutate that if you needed to.
Cool.
Yeah.
Matt says if you're using active record, cool.
Instances feel mutable. Guard clauses. So
those are awesome. Cool.
So you just get to. I'm just gonna undo all of this because I got distracted.
Sorry, totally derailed you.
I forgot where I was. All good. So I think we were on heavily indented code is bad code, right?
Yeah, and you were replacing these with guard clauses.
Exactly. So just something small like using an unless or return. So you just want to cut that method call off, because all it's really doing in this else is returning false. So we can just return nil. So return unless this is true. So previously we were doing if that is true, do all of this. Otherwise, do this, right? So we can take that whole big block out. Let's leave a space between the guard clauses, and then just indent that back a little bit.
That's really cool.
Do stuff like that all over Ruby, which is nice. As Matt's saying, you can do this guard clause before we set all these variables. Nice job, Matt, in the chat. I really need to figure this out.
Well, this is great. Now you're pairing with chat. Perfect.
Yeah, now we're pairing with chat. Come on, chat. What else can we do here? Right? We do a whole bunch of other stuff.
Should we call John Britton out? John Britton's in chat. Come on, John, get out. Get your Rails knowledge out.
Get your Rails knowledge out of here. John's probably shaking his head.
Well, they're actually funny. I was about to say, you now explain to me what guard clauses are and why they're better in this case. Makes some comments that a conversation that John and one of our other engineers, Simon, having the other day suddenly makes sense. So that's very useful. Yeah,
we're aiming to educate here.
Yeah.
So just doing stuff like that across your application, just small things that I would have never known earlier, which is really interesting because this feels so basic to me now, but like we were saying earlier, you don't know what you don't know, right? I didn't even know guard clauses were a thing, and if I don't use it in programming languages, you'll never know to use it in Ruby, right? So things like that were
super cool,
really great to see, and really great to learn in Raise. Another nice thing would be some of the stuff I'm doing. I think I had cron jobs set up for a lot of this stuff, and a nice thing that I learned from actually John over a lunch conversation was learning about like Redis and background jobs. Everything in this application is happening synchronously. Basically, you send a request and it might do a ton of stuff and just hang the server. So
the way you're talking about, you'd queue that job in Redis and then execute it with a background job at some point. Is that correct?
You use something like Sidekick, and what would happen is a Sidekick is a gem that effectively handles like background jobs. And it runs its own like job server effectively. So it's a whole different server. You have like this Redis store, and I can send something to like Redis, like a key value, like a key value pair, right?
Right.
And Redis will, well, Sidekick will take that job. It'll evaluate like, okay, this is the job I need to run. This is the arguments that I gave it, which is the value, some sort of string that's been passed in, and it'll evaluate that job, and it'll do it completely separate from your main Rails app, right? And yeah, John, feel free to critique this Ruby. I might just be, I might be completely wrong here. Totally tell me.
Okay, so that sounds super interesting.
Yeah, and then that job will basically happen asynchronously,
Right.
which is super nice, especially for an application like this, where, or any application really, you don't want a lot of things to happen synchronously. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people think like Ruby is like slow, or like Rails is slow.
Yeah. And this also gets back to, I guess, like your point earlier, where like when you built it just for, wait, this might be before stream that had this conversation. Anyway, but you built it originally for yourself, and some of the like tips you picked up was explicitly about like making it work like at scale as well.
Understanding problems for scale, right? That's something that you don't learn in like a boot camp. It's something that you don't learn when you're self-teaching and when you're making these projects. A lot of times you're never going to encounter problems of scale, right? Like because unless you're somehow like artificially loading your server, you're not going to figure it out. So just kind of like being taught a different mindset by John and Chris was to kind of like understand that like this application is not going to be used by just me. This application is going to be used by thousands of people at the same time, and understanding and kind of solving those problems is very important as well. And definitely something I wouldn't have figured out on my own. Didn't like, well, I heard it and it made total sense. Mind-blowing experience that I didn't even think about. So all sorts of stuff like that. What else is in here that I can talk about that I didn't use? My test coverage is non-existent in this.
Right.
Probably would give me an aneurysm now, because I love testing, and that's something that I got.
This is RSpec, which
we
heard a little bit about on the show this week.
I didn't do anything in this. This is RSpec.
Right. Oh, this is the default like RSpec file.
This is the default configuration when you get to
So what's your approach to testing now? Like, are you operating full TDD or?
So I guess it depends, right? I didn't even know the difference between like TDD and BDD prior to like working with Chris, and another thing that I learned was kind of understanding the difference of TDD and BDD for those who aren't familiar, test-driven development and behavior-driven development. In test-driven development, typically you write the test first, and you kind of like fill out all the parameters, and you kind of write your code to make the test pass. Whereas in BDD, you kind of like write a lot of your code first, and then you test the behavior of that code. So depending on the situation, sometimes it's really nice to like in an agile workflow, pull a ticket and kind of understand, like make sense of the ticket and think about it in a perspective to know whether test-driven development is going to be useful. And in a lot of cases it is. And test-driven development has helped me write like very decoupled code to make sure that I'm not entangling any like external dependencies for this new thing that I'm adding. Because when you're writing the test, you only want to test the specific new code, right? You want to isolate.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, like, what kind of things do you look for to make that decision? Like when you see a piece of like, you pull a ticket and you're like, this is a TDT ticket. Like, what is it that like sets you off on that?
Yeah. So typically, like, I don't have any tests. I don't know if it's worth sharing right now. I'm gonna just stop sharing for a second here while we talk about this. But test development, it's super useful, and like some of the things that you look for in a ticket is and ideally you might be able to do test-driven development for every ticket, but I know anybody who's ever worked with like a production code base knows there's going to be some tech debt in it.
Coverage will slip.
Coverage will slip, unfortunately, and sometimes you just got to do something fast. In that case, like sometimes you'll do like behavior-driven development, but ideally you kind of like isolate what you need to do with this ticket. You kind of realize that it's a very isolated thing. You don't need to couple any extra dependencies to it. And in that case, it makes sense to think about like, what are you trying to accomplish with this piece of code, and then just write the spec that way. So kind of like spec out like what your end goal is, like what your inputs are, and what your end goal is. All right. So you write the spec out that way, and then kind of create the method to make those specs pass.
Right. Amazing.
Very cool. And then you kind of iterate on that to clean it up a bit. Yeah, I think another thing that I learned in Raise was I used to write code and try to be perfect the first time around. Typically that just ends up floating a lot of random ideas in your head as you're writing. But just kind of like writing out what you're thinking, pseudocode sometimes, and then cleaning it up as you go. Has helped me a lot, and it helps kind of like have things out on. It's similar to like writing things out on paper.
Right, for sure. There's like a process of like clarifying your thoughts that like only happens as you're like getting them down out of your brain kind of situation. Exactly.
And yeah, like now all of this sounds trivial to me in my day to day. Like I do all this stuff without even really thinking. But as I'm looking at this prior project, clearly it wasn't a very like instinctual thing for me before.
Oh, it's super fun.
Yeah, super fun. Man, I don't really want to look through this more. I'm sorry. This is bad.
So you're currently rewriting this project. Oh, so you said you were using oh my god, brain failure. You were using an algorithm or a service to do the summarization. Were you using one in particular?
Yeah, I was using Alien natural language processing, but I don't believe they have a free tier anymore. So I have to do something else. Yeah. But back then, the service was pretty new. It was Alien Text API, I believe it was. And they have a great like natural language processing, a whole service built around natural language processing. And I believe now Azure has a similar one, Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, I imagine all the cloud providers must have.
They Azure's pretty interesting though, because they do something similar to Alien where they can analyze sentiment of text. So you can, another feature like I wanted to eventually add was in the morning you only get like positive news, and then later in the day in the afternoon you get all the negative news. So you don't wake up to terrible stuff, you know?
I also feel like there should be like thresholds where it's like, hey, the news today is like 90% terrible. We're just turning it off. You don't get anything today. Like,
that's great. Yeah. So all of those cloud providers do all those like AI and natural language processing providers do stuff like that. If anybody's interested, you could totally use a lot of that stuff for free. Make some nice open source projects out of it.
Very cool. Awesome. Neat. Yes, actually on open source, I think that leads us nicely into some other projects that we've briefly spoken about that you were a fan of. So some of the things we've been asking like other folks on the show is like, given this is Hacktoberfest and it's a good month for getting involved in open source and making your first contributions, what are like some of your favorite open source projects that are out there?
Ooh, favorite open source projects. I guess like all the stuff that I use in my day-to-day. I like just like a big application that helps me in my day-to-day life is Bitwarden. Cool. Which is open source like password manager, just similar to like LastPass and 1Password. But it's completely open source. You can find it on GitHub. Super great password manager, totally free for personal use as well, which is really nice. But being open source actually provides a lot of like really nice benefits. Some people are kind of like skeptical when something that's keep all your information secure is open source. I think like the first thing you get is typically, oh, but if the code is widely available, it's going to be easier to like crack. But typically you get a lot of, you also have like the opposite where a lot of people find security vulnerabilities and it gets patched very quickly. And you can get contributions from people who aren't even in your team.
Right.
Nice. And you have thousands of eyes looking at this, and there are going to be tons and tons of users. A lot of them are pretty technical, and because a lot of them support open source, and they'll try to contribute to the project. So I really like Bitwarden for that reason. It's like a good example of like open source being like nice and secure as well.
Also, I am right. Yeah. So Bitwarden also has like. Bitwarden's also really fascinating as an example of like open source piece of software that does actually have a full and flourishing business around it. The reason I was thinking there was because I was pretty sure I'm pretty sure a company I work with uses Bitwarden. They do. So,
a totally like enterprise grade service that you have business on, right? So
Yeah.
another thing is, why would I make my code free and open source if I'm trying to make it? You totally can. It's totally doable. There are tons of examples of it.
And it's like not even just like a little open source. Like this is, you got the desktop application, the mobile application, the web.
You have the extension
server.
open source, everything.
Yeah. Super cool. Unfortunately, they don't have the Hacktoberfest topic, so they cannot be contributed to for Hacktoberfest. But
it doesn't count towards Hacktoberfest, but there are tons of great open issues in case anybody wants to look at them. Small things, nothing security like related. So don't worry if you're using Bitwarden. Another great one. What else is great? Rails, phenomenal of open source. I clearly use it. I use it in my day job. I would probably say that's like my favorite open source project, other than what else is open source? I believe React is open source as well. I think the whole React repo is available on GitHub. It's maintained.
Where is this?
On the Facebook team. It's maintained by a core team at Facebook, but I believe it's open source.
Facebook/React. Yeah, looks like it. Where's the license? Let's have a look. It's MIT. So
Okay, there you go. So React's a great example of an open source project.
Wonderful.
My three favorites.
Cool. So there's one last project of yours I want to ask you about before we lose you, which is I want to hear about what's it called? Typing
Royale.
Typing Royale, that's the one. So the part of the reason I want to talk about this is just because just from an aesthetic perspective, I opened this project up, was like, yes, the design on this was nice. Sorry, I'm currently pulling up the repo now. Here we go.
All good. that README, you can kind of show it to everybody.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Which one? This one. Look at that. It's amazing. It's like proper Pokemon aesthetics.
Yeah, it was a nice retro typing game. And the reason I actually made it with a partner, Shane from Flatiron School as well. And it was really great because we were really nerding out when we were in this code camp. And I had a custom key. I built a custom keyboard, actually. I think I have it.
There is definitely a couple of keyboard nerds that I recognize in the chat. You're gonna have to tell us what your keyboard is.
Oh, okay, fine. This is a GK. This is GK64 layout, so it's 10 keyless. You got your arrow keys here, which is nice. Which is one of the main things I like in a 60%, which I was gonna miss out on a 60% keyboard. It's one of the few layouts that has the arrow keys as well. Also, I have what is it? Tangerine switches on
Tangerine. I've never heard of those. I can't believe how quickly we got the question which switches in chat. That's like someone heard keyboard like switches.
I have Tangerine switches in it right now. I thought I wasn't gonna like linear switches, but I really like these Tangerine switches. Before that, I had Hako Royal Clears in it, which is a nice. It's like a box switch with a little small tactile bump, but not very loud, like a blue switch. I was nerding out about this keyboard, and my partner Shane had also just built a keyboard, and we were just thinking about like some project we could make together to kind of really. It was an excuse to show off our keyboards,
right?
So we kind of like set up in a corner one day with Typing Royale after we made it with both of our keyboards and allowed other people to type on them and race each other. So I guess the whole premise of this project is it's a typing game, but we utilize WebSockets to create a real-time connection between. I think at the moment when I made this, it was only 2 players. But the code was in place to scale it up to 4 users. But we were using like free Heroku servers that were like really crumbling under active WebSocket connections anyway.
So this is what Action Cable is. I see. Action Cable is WebSockets. That makes sense. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So we used WebSockets there to establish a real-time connection, and you could see your opponent's progress as they were typing. So you could kind of race to the finish. It was a real-time thing. So it's nice. You guys get the same prompt and just type through it. It's super fun.
Very cool. I've just seen this and I've just seen this style sheet from it. This is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what we used.
just gonna add that to my pocket. Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Rad. Wow. So that is that Wait, when was this made? Is
That was
this still? Oh, it's still what website? So does the website still work? Oh, it does.
I don't know. Maybe the backend. I don't know if the backend will give
It looks like it's all right. Just finished the screen share. It looks like it works. Let's give it a go. I'm sorry if I break your website live on a stream.
Okay. The Heroku backend, since it was one of the free backends, it might take 10 minutes to start up.
We'll give it a go.
Ooh, yeah, it's probably booting now.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. Very cool though.
You don't have to log in to start a game though.
Oh really?
You just select 25 words, one player.
Oh yeah, look, it did work. Yeah.
Yeah. It probably just took a little minute to.
Oh wait, it's doing word by word. Oh god. Nice. Oh, that's real cool. Yeah, we definitely use this. This is so fun.
Yeah, a couple this was I think we made this in a week, maybe less than a week. Actually, yeah, we made this in less than a week, which was kind of nice because we had another project idea and then we pivoted to this.
Very cool.
A couple of other things if anybody wants to contribute to this project. It's open source, so you can go to GitHub and
we've just been poking around. There you go.
Yeah, contribute
Typing
to it.
Royale backend. Oh wait, it's just the backend. Is that not on the?
There's a front end repo as well.
Okay, cool.
They're just
link for there we go. Link to front end repo. Cool. Yeah. Very nice. Alrighty, cool. Well, that is us for time today. So thank you so much for joining us, Sukrit. This was a lot of fun. I feel like you've introduced a new permanent addition to the show, which is looking for our old code and fixing it. So thank you very much.
Really heartbreaking. I don't know how many developers you'll scare away with that.
I think it was great. And not only as I said before the show, I think it was like everyone in the audience would have had a deep pang of empathy. But then you just what I didn't expect was you just straight up fix it on the spot, which was awesome. It's very cool.
I wasn't expecting to. I was expecting to primarily talk about it.
Yeah. And then you were just I can do it.
You need to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been staring at it and talking about it for long enough now that you just had worn a hole.
You have to do at least something. It doesn't have to be the perfect solution, but just do something.
That's awesome. Well, we look forward to when you do finish remaking that project and being able to get our news summarized. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Twitch, for watching. Alrighty, I will remove you from the stage and do our outro thing. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Farewell. Alrighty, everyone. Thank you again so much, Sukrit. That was a lot of fun. And thank you all for watching and for your questions and interactions in the chat. Just a couple of brief things before we send you on your way. That is our last show for today. We are back again at 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 10 a.m. European Time. Tomorrow, the morning show, I'll be joined by Florian Dries, who is still in the audience. Everyone say hi to Flor. We're going to be talking about documentation. We've got a couple of different things to talk about. We're going to be talking about the importance of documentation, which I think is a doubly important topic to talk about this year in terms of open source documentation contributions. And we're going to bring that round to talk about some things like write the docs and actually maybe doing a documentation contribution. We will see. So that's our first show tomorrow. And then we're joined by Brian Douglas from GitHub and Midday, which I'm super excited for. We're going to be talking about open sourced, his project for onboarding new contributors. So again, we're going to be diving into some code and hopefully talking about open source and what it is, but also hopefully looking at some of the Hacktoberfest issues that Brian has open on open sourced. And our last show today of the day tomorrow, I'm very excited about. That is our Dev2 forum takeover. I get the evening off because Dev2 are taking over this channel, and they will be talking about Forum, the software that runs the Dev2 site, and addressing some Hacktoberfest issues with Forum and talking about some of the issues you can contribute to. I heard from them today that tomorrow is a very special accessibility aimed episode. So if you're interested in web accessibility and accessibility on large applications like Forum, tomorrow is going to be a fantastic episode to tune in for. That's the 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time show tomorrow when Dev2 will be joining us. So all those great things. If you want to find out if you forget that schedule, because I've just shouted it at you over the internet, you can find the full schedule at twitch.tv/RaiseDevs schedule. And if you enjoyed the show today and you have some questions that you would like answered on the show, whether they are about your own Hacktoberfest contribution or you have an issue that you're stuck with or you don't know where to start, we also answer questions on this show. Believe it or not, we answered some questions earlier today. We were looking for, we were helping folks who were struggling to find good Go repositories. So if you have any questions, what you can do is you can go to the help desk page, raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. On that page, you can submit your questions. And then what we'll do, we'll review those questions. We'll pick one of our guests who is the best place to answer those questions. And we'll send you a little email about when that question is being answered. And after the show, we'll send you the recording in case you couldn't make it. So you can get your questions answered with us at raise.dev/Hacktoberfest. And I believe that's everything. The final note isn't everything. The final note, we're doing this show for a month. We've got 3 shows a day for the rest of the month. So still plenty of time for your ideas. If there's something you want us to do or something you want us to cover, you can contact us. You can get us on Twitter. You can get us on email. You can come, if anyone's watching this and was like, I would love to be a guest, you can come join the show. We still have a couple of special guest slots left. And then just final reminder, last week was the launch of Raise.dev as well as of this year's Hacktoberfest. And as Sukrit mentioned and walked us through his story, we are a service that's here to help you level up your developer career, whether it's your first job, your second job, a promotion, a project you're trying to finish. We'll hook you up with one of our expert coaches who will guide you through your professional development to get you the experience you need to get to where you want to be. And you can sign up for free with us whilst we're on early access at raise.dev to have a kickoff call with your very own coach. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and I will bid you adieu with some lovely music. Farewell.